Greetings everyone, peace to you all.
Iris, is that you? It's me, Jiao.
Welcome to another episode of Praiseworthy Reviews, where we go through video games to see if they're excellent and commendable. Today, we will be reviewing 1000xRESIST, a narrative adventure game by new developer Sunset Visitor and published by Fellow Traveler. In 1000xRESIST, players play as Watcher, the Sister Blue who is tasked with receiving memories from the All-Mother. The game includes some references to the 2019-2020 Hong Kong protests and takes place after, in the resulting exodus from Hong Kong. As usual, we will be evaluating the game based on 5 criteria: fun factor, educational value, cultural value, spiritual value, and cost. For context, I have finished the game to the credits. So without further ado, let's jump in.
I want you to see from the beginning. There is a then, and you'll receive it.
Despite being described as an adventure game, the gameplay mechanics of 1000xRESIST are rather simplistic when compared with similar games. There are no puzzle mechanics that many point-and-click adventures might have. The closest comparison might be that of Telltale games like The Walking Dead or The Wolf Among Us, but even then, the gameplay is still rather simplistic. Most of the gameplay mechanics involve finding the next person to talk to. In the first area, there is plenty to explore and many NPCs to interact with to get a feel for the environment. However, as the game progresses, in many cases the gameplay is just walk to the next person and press interact. The game tries to mix it up with a few other types of simple gameplay. There is an abstract way of traversing memories in a grappling hook style of traversal. There are dialogue options, but these are simplistic and sometimes annoying. Instead of giving the player agency, the dialogue wheel is often used to make artistic statements, which is fine for emphasis, but quickly feels overused. There are no progression systems, no other role-playing, nothing but walking around and talking to people. Again, this is fine in its own way. I am someone who has enjoyed many visual novels in the past. However, much of the fun is bogged down in questionable artistic choices, forced switches to first person, excessive use of blur, forced intentionally slow movement. This is fine when used artistically, but many of these things feel overdone. What is left is a lack of engagement and a desire to move on to the next section. Fun did not feel as much of a priority as the artist's creative vision, and if you look at the games I review, I generally enjoy artistic games, but somehow I had trouble enjoying this one. Overall, I'm going to give the game 2 stars for fun factor. 1000xRESIST provides little in terms of value for motor skills, with the only motor skill-based gameplay being the memory traversal. However, that's not intended to be challenging and is indeed not challenging. On the other hand, there is quite a bit of educational value in other ways. The game references the real-life Hong Kong protests and directly highlights some challenges of immigrants. For the well-read, there are numerous allusions to Christianity and the Bible, even in the marketing material.
垃圾桶.
What did you just say?
Come on, you know. Aren't you 香港人?
There are a few phrases of Mandarin Chinese, as well as Cantonese, that can be learned with accurate pronunciation. There are times when vague, abstract phrases have to be recontextualized, resulting in some interesting exercises that, in my opinion, were some of the best parts of the game. Perhaps the most valuable educational experience comes in the literary analysis of some of the poetry, with careful guidance and reflection on diction. The game is intelligent, and it treats the players as intelligent.
Red to blue.
Oh, I know I don't need to tell you, but it has so many resonances. The glowing red bodies of the occupants and the scourge they brought to the surface. The many colors of you sisters. The almost dream of blue skies and breathable air. It's amazing how many different meanings you can pack into just 2 little words.
So overall, I'm going to give the game 4 stars for educational value. The art of the game is definitely the strongest part of 1000xRESIST. There are many places in the game where the artistic choices really work well. Colors are well used, and even though the visuals are not particularly impressive from a technical standpoint, they are still quite striking. The animations are not particularly memorable, but they generally work for what they need to do, especially in terms of gestures and poses conveying the drama of many scenes. Similarly, the music didn't particularly stand out, and in some places actually felt a little cliché and forgettable. The highlight of the game was definitely the voice acting. It was clear that a lot of care was put into this section.
Is she sick?
She'll be alright.
How come we can't talk about it?
When we sometimes does things that don't need to be said.
Why?
Because the truth can hurt people.
Even without using big-name professional voice actors, The expressiveness of the voice acting was good enough that I generally wanted to hear the acting of each line of dialogue. The writing was easily the other highlight. Many of the literary choices, like the poems and the abstract phrases, are used in very clever ways. The settings of the game really serve to emphasize the themes that the writers want to convey, particularly with the world before and the orchard. The non-linear sequencing was a little bit more hit and miss, with some parts sticking the landing and other parts not doing quite so well. I don't mind non-linear sequencing, but sometimes the use of successive vignettes in rapid succession got repetitive.
Not the only one who loved Fixer, you know.
And the worst part of the story, in my opinion, were the characters. Almost every character in the game is completely unlikable, with the exception of maybe Bartender and Healer. The flaws of the characters were very realistic, but some of them were quite overwhelming. Despite these minor issues in plot development and characterization, the story still manages to be compelling, even if it emphasizes mood and feeling over meaning. At time of recording, a little over 1 year after the game debuted, approximately 100,000 copies of the game have been sold, which is an impressive feat for a new studio. The game was even nominated for a couple of awards, though there were relatively few wins. Based on its value as art and its cultural impact, I'm going to assign the game 4 stars for its cultural value. I have a lot to say about the spiritual value of 1000xRESIST.
Yo, girl, I'm selling. You buying?
There is a lot of negative content. The vulgar language is consistent throughout the game. On the other hand, there's no sex and the sexualization of women is relatively minor. There is a lot of drinking and getting drunk in the game. My biggest concern is the suicidal ideation that multiple characters have. The game is sympathetic to their pain, but I don't think it handles suicidal ideation very well. The violence is mostly artistic. The worst thing portrayed is probably what can be seen in the trailer of Steam, that of the All-Mother being impaled through the heart. There are other, more intense scenes of violence, but the developers are careful not to make it too graphic, implying but not showing. There is also some depiction of bullying, which may be troubling. Despite the considerable negative content, there is also a lot of positive content as well. There are good depictions of loyalty and love in troubled family relationships. The messages take on very difficult themes to work with, and the writers generally do well in portraying these difficult issues with nuance and clarity. Again, in mostly biblical ways. For more analysis on the themes of the game, check out my biblical themes video for this game. Overall, I'm going to assign the game 4 stars for spiritual value. My feelings on the cost of 1000xRESIST is a little complicated. For the time poor, the main story can be completed in about 12 hours, which feels quite accessible. However, I feel that this runtime is bloated by poor design choices and certain points of the game that artificially extend the length. For the time rich, there is little additional gameplay. Unless you want to hunt down random items for achievements, there's nothing else to do. 1000xRESIST retails for $19.99 USD and can sometimes be found for about 25% off, which feels okay, alright. Not great, but not expensive. Overall, based on the content value, narrative accessibility, and asking price, I'm going to give the game 3 stars for cost. 1000xRESIST was an interesting game that I am quite torn about. Perhaps the expectations I had it were too high, and I was biased by its overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam. To me, the gameplay was surprisingly unengaging, even for a heavily focused narrative game. While I am normally patient and enjoy visual novels, I think the clunky gameplay interspersed between narrative sections really impacts the pacing and brings frustration in the middle of the storytelling. Even so, the story beats are well written, and I can definitely see why many enjoyed it so much, even if my own enjoyment met with some resistance. Based on the criteria discussed in the video, I subjectively assign 1000xRESIST the rating of sale selection. That's all I have for you in this video. Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.